Okay, detailed history of the small size United States notes. So, when we first went to the small size notes at all in the series 1928, with the signatures of Tate and Mellon, only the $2 note had been started at that time, not the $5. But we can look at it fairly clearly here. It had all the standard accoutrements. Series of 1928. This note is a legal tender at its face value for all debts, public and private. Okay, all the United States note. The United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $2. So there they are, $2, $2. Nice picture of the Monticello. So, that being the case, that was by itself. Now, during the time of the next signature combination, this is when the $5 is introduced. So, the 2 is already moved up to 1928A when you now have Woods and Mellon. The $5 is simply started during the era of Woods and Mellon, so it's 1928 without an A. So the $2 keeps its familiar appearance, as you've seen, and will change very slightly along the way. The $5 is pretty much the same image as $5 bills would have, clear into much more recent times. And the same pattern as we go through signature combination and signature combination will simply continue. So moving to the next one, which is Woods and Ogden Mills. The $2 goes to 1928B. Same reverse as always. And the $5 goes up to 1928A. And its back is the same. So then we get up to the next one. The next one here is Julian and Morgenthau. That's a 1928C for the $2. And Julian and Morgenthau, a 1928B for the $5. Again, the backs are unchanged from what we've seen so far. I'm going to leave these out because the next appearance, the next letter up, is going to be 1928D for the $2. Oh, we'll get back to this in a moment. And the 1928C for the $5. But I forgot one other thing. With the coming of the Morgenthau, Julian and Morgenthau, you have a little bit of lacework appearing on the $2 down in this corner. See, which hadn't been there before. So let's look at the original one here. You see, it was just clean. And now they've added this little bit of stuff there. Not much, but it's added. So, that said, now, as we go from one set of Julian and Morgenthau, and this lacework will be here for the rest of series 1928 $2 bills. So now we look at the other side, and let's look at what happened next. And that was, apparently they had a different way of printing things. And the backs, though again, while still basically identical, do have one tiny difference that sets them apart. If you look at the little number, that 203, very small. Of that 1492, it's bigger, okay? So that's the end of that. And once again, you have this very tiny 219, it looks like, or 239 there in the first cycle of Morgenthau and Julian. And the second one, there's the 310, and that's visibly bigger. I mean, look at the difference in size there. And that's the only discernible difference, okay, between that, except that the letter, same Julian and Morgenthau that have been there for a long, long time. And things have advanced by a single letter. Well, as we move beyond that phase, we get into now Julian and Vincent. And so this one's already got 1928E. Well, that one's a 1928D. But once again, nothing else has changed. The numbers are still a little bit larger than before. And the $2 has a little bit of lacework down in here. So nothing else has changed. Alright, now we move to the next pair of signatures. So now we move to Julian and Schneider. So now this is 1928F for the $2 and 1928E for the $5. And once again, as you can see, the backs are still the same familiar backs that we've been seeing all along, with the only change that the number is a little bit bigger than it had been at the start. And that is all. And this continues on into the next series of these. Actually, the last of the series, 1928. As you can see, the $2 gets all the way up to 1928G. And the $5 gets up to 1928F. Now, it's got Clark and Snyder. So we finally, Julian is retired or left, and now Clark has taken his place, but Snyder now is still there. So there we are. Everything else is the same. So that's nice to know. All right. And the backs still look the same. With a larger number, but otherwise they are identical. Okay. Finally, 1928 is replaced with series 1953. Well, we move there straight to the next pair of signatures. They've both changed. We've had a change of administration from the Democrat administration of, Julian and Morgan for how long, to the Republican administration of Eisenhower. And here, Priest and Humphrey. So you can see there's changes. All right, the lacework that we had in here by introduced with Julian and Morgan disappears from there. Don't know why, but there it is. The back, okay, a bigger change is that stuff has switched sides. So you still have this note as a legal tender at its face value for all debts, public and private. Public and private. And now I'm realizing something else has happened. I'll have to go back and revisit that. See, and but the 2 is on this side, but the seal has moved. The seal has moved from this side to this side, so and gotten smaller to be consistent with the red, the blue, and green seals of the other kinds of money. But other than that, surprisingly large amount still remains the same. And with the $5 again, we moved the seal from this side to this side. We've added grayed out numbers for 2 and 5 to kind of match what we have for the $1. So they have a consistency that's kind of introduced with the other notes. So that's what that's done. Now, we got one other thing, and that is that at the beginning, it would not only say public or private, except duties on imports and imports. And imports interest on the public debt. So apparently that change takes place with the Julian and Morgenthau. So before that, when it's Woods and Mills, it still is public or private, except duties on imports and interest on the public debt. So I missed that change. So there that is. Well, we move through this new different size, the series 1953. All right, but now they're also synchronized so that when we move to the next change in signatures, Humphrey is replaced with Anderson. You see? So we move in both of these to series 1953A. And there they are. Series Back sides still no discernible changes. And then we get to B, 1953B. And again, just now, the Kennedy administration, so we move to Elizabeth Riddle Smith and C. Douglas Dillon. And that's the only change. The backs are the same as always. And then continuing under the Kennedy/Johnson administrations, we've moved to Kathy O'Kay Granahan and Dillon for 1953C. And again, still no changes on the reverse side. Now, we move to 1963. This is when they go from the wet printing to the dry printing. So, as I've shown before, the portrait expands slightly within its now slightly widened bubble. And the same here for Lincoln. And in fact, all of the printing is just a tiny bit different because as we go to the 1960, all that will pay to the bearer is gone also. Now it's just this noted legal tender for all debts, public and private, nothing else. And on the back sides, the different sizing will show up in some slight changes. Also, the bigger change is this was when In God We Trust was added. In God We Trust. But notice how the Monticello seems just a trifling bit larger. See, at the bottom of it, you got a lot of space here, but not so much space there. Okay, and the trees have more room above them than here. So the picture is a little bit bigger. And the same for the Lincoln Memorial. It gets a little bit bigger and closer to its edges. And not just because of the In God We Trust. It is actually just the tiniest bit bigger. That's because these are printed dry to their full size. So that all represents the change from the 1953 to the 1963. So these are the 1963s. Now, we're almost done because the $2 goes into a 1963A when we have Henry H. Fowler. And that kind of represents the end of that denomination, because somewhere about 1966 or so, the denomination ceases and stops until it gets revived as a Federal Reserve note in 1976 with the signing of the Declaration of Independence on the back. Strangely enough, this $5, without any changes in signatures or version, just 63, no letter, actually continues to be printed beyond this clear into 1968, before it too falls out of print. And that is the end, with one other exception we get to in the next video, of the United States note.